So, what really fuels the American economy? I mean, is it Wall Street? Is it Silicon Valley? Or is it something else entirely? Well, in this explainer, we're going to peel back the layers on money, on power, and what truly makes the US economic engine run. You've probably heard some version of this story, right? That the US economy is just one giant gamble, a system that just throws money at startups and kind of crosses its fingers, hoping for the next big thing. It's a really compelling myth. And yeah, on the surface, it makes a certain kind of sense. I mean, we all love a good breakthrough story. But if we stop there, we miss the real story of how this whole thing actually works. Because that whole big bet narrative, it completely overlooks the real engine room of the US economy. The part that keeps the gears turning day in and day out. The reality is actually hiding in plain sight. Seriously. Forget about moonshots for just a second and think about your morning coffee, the gas in your car, your Netflix subscription. All that consumer spending, is the true foundation. It accounts for roughly 70% of the entire US economy. It's just millions of us making daily choices that completely dwarf the impact of those high-profile gambles. Okay, so if the economy is powered by millions of businesses, everything from your local coffee shop to the next tech giant, how do they all get funded? Well, it turns out America uses two completely different engines to fuel its growth. And here they are, side by side. On the left, you've got your traditional loans. That's debt. Think of it as the steady, reliable fuel for millions of small, everyday businesses. Then, on the right, you have venture capital. That's equity. This stuff is a rocket fuel. It's a super high-risk bet on just a handful of startups that have world-changing ambitions. Now, here's where things get really interesting. When you look at the direct venture capital investment as a piece of the entire economic pie, I'm talking the total value of everything produced in the country, it's almost invisible. Like it's a tiny, tiny fraction of the total US GDP. It seems totally insignificant. But, and this is a huge but, here's where the whole story flips. That tiny, almost invisible sliver of investment, it punches way, way above its weight. Companies that were originally funded by VCs are now responsible for a staggering 21% of the entire US economy. That is just incredible economic leverage. So this is the secret sauce right here. The American system is like a forest. It has these deep, sprawling roots. That's the broad access to credit for millions of everyday businesses. But it also launches rockets, and that's the elite system of equity for the super high-risk, world-changing breakthroughs. You absolutely need both to thrive. This unique dual-engine model raises a really fascinating question. Is this the only way to pump money into an economy? To find out, let's compare the U.S. approach to its main economic rival, China, because as we're about to see, they have two completely different philosophies. And this table just lays out the contrast perfectly. Look at the focus. The U.S. tries to nurture a broad ecosystem for everyone, while China targets very specific strategic sectors. And the government's role? The U.S. is mostly indirect, offering guarantees. China is direct. We're talking huge subsidies. And for risk, in the U.S., private funds know they'll have a lot of failures just to find one big winner. In China, the state tries to pick the winners from the start. The result? The U.S. tends to be amazing at breakthrough innovation, while China achieves just incredible manufacturing scale. So we have these two very different models for pumping money into an economy. But here's the thing. Whether it's the U.S. or China, the act of creating and directing that money has a powerful, often hidden consequence. And it's a consequence that affects every single one of us. And that consequence has a name, the inflation tax. The best way to think about it is, it's not a tax you vote on. It's the hidden loss of your money's real value. The dollars in your wallet suddenly buy less than they did yesterday. It's a quiet transfer of wealth from your pocket to whoever created that new money. This quote just gets right to the heart of the issue, doesn't it? It poses this fundamental question of fairness. Why should we work so hard for our money if its value can just be diminished with the push of a button? So let's just break down how this works. The government creates more money. Simple enough. But that devalues every single dollar that's already out there. So the price of goods goes up, and you end up on a treadmill running faster just to stay in the same place. You literally have to work more just to afford the same things, which is why some economists call it a tax, one that happens without any legislation or any debate. Once you start thinking about who controls the money supply, you inevitably arrive at a much bigger, much more provocative question about the ultimate relationship between money and state power. So let's just walk through the final implication here. If a government, and only the government, has the monopoly power to create the money we're all required to use, then where does its power actually end? Does that monopoly on money effectively give the state a level of control that is, for all intents and purposes, almost absolute? I mean, think about what that power really means. It allows the state to fund its own deficits without limit, to bail out politically connected companies, to influence the entire economy. Ultimately, some people argue it can make the very idea of private ownership feel, well, conditional. There's a name for the ideology that supports this level of state control over our economic lives. It's called statism, and its core pillar is the state's monopoly over money. And that leaves us with a final, crucial question to think about. If one entity has the exclusive power to create money out of thin air, how much of everything else do they ultimately control?